How's it going, OFPs, and welcome to another episode of the Off-Field Players Podcast, the only podcast for aspiring sports industry professionals. I'm your host, Philip Hall, and I hope everybody's having an awesome week or weekend by the time you're listening to this. And yeah, I know I've been away for quite a bit, took about a 1 month hiatus from the Off Field Players podcast, during the holidays and also just starting out 2024. And just to give it away, this is the first episode of 2024 for the Off Field Players podcast. And definitely very excited to be back doing this. I had some time to be able to craft up some new ideas for new episodes that I definitely want to get back to doing. And yeah, trust me, everybody, the Off Field Players podcast is not going anywhere. It is here to stay. I'm very excited to be back doing it again. Time just wasn't playing right with me, but definitely great to be back to finally put out an episode. As we continue to go through 2024, and also just to keep everybody updated on everything that's going to be happening around the sports industry throughout 2024, because there's a lot of big events coming up, from the Summer Olympics in Paris to, the Super Bowl that's happening. Oh, by the time this episode is up, happening next weekend. And yeah, just, a lot to look forward to and a lot to be up to date about, especially for the OFPs that are still working their way and finishing out school, for young OFPs still in college, and also for the OFPs that are looking for a career change, that are, looking to work in the sports industry. But don't worry, everybody, I'm still here to be able to bring that information to you all, and just to be able to, continue to grow this podcast for what it is. This is a platform that has been getting positive reviews from people from last year, and just the guests that I've had on, they've said great things about the podcast and the direction that I'm trying to take it into, and really just the message and the purpose behind why I started this. And I know, like, just for how I was feeling during the time I had off, away, busy with work and everything, I knew I had to find some way to come back and to be able to get the podcast to continue to grow it for what it is. Because, I tell people that this podcast, this platform is like my baby. I need to feed it, I need to grow it, I need to nourish it, and I just need to be able to continue to expose it. Just be able to spread the word to people all over the world that listen to it. And yeah, it's just very, very glad to finally be back. And I'm sorry, for just going off like just winding off right there. But I want to get into what I want to discuss in the return episode of the Off Field Players podcast in here in 2024. And yeah, if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you go back and watch the last episode that I recorded before I went on hiatus. I did my interview with Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR. And yeah, it was a fantastic interview. Me and Steve had a very intriguing and awesome conversation. And yeah, it was a milestone episode for me in my podcasting career. Being able to interview the president of a major sports league here in the United States, and not only a sports league here in the United States, but the top sports league in motorsports, and a league that I personally worked for. It was definitely great to have Steve on, just to recap the 75th anniversary of NASCAR, and just also hear his plans as president of the sport for, where he wants to take the sport in the future, what he hopes to look forward to as the sport continues to grow. And yeah, just continuing to, be a great leader in the sports industry. I mean, I've had personal conversations with Steve, outside of the podcast. I still stay in contact with him here and there. And, of course, for the times that we've met on occasion, whether it was at the racetrack or, at the office in Daytona, or even just connecting, doing one-on-one, he's always been, great to hear him. And he's been doing incredible things for the sport. And yeah, it was just a great interview that I was able to do with him. Very blessed to have that opportunity. And yeah, just, if you're new to the podcast, and if you're, interested on learning more about what it's like to work in NASCAR, or just aspects of the sport, highly recommend that you go check out my interview with Steve Phelps. Again, it was episode 29, and it's up on YouTube, up on everywhere where I have my podcast. So definitely recommend that you go check out the last episode of the Off Field Players podcast. And before I get into today's discussion, Of course, I want to remind everybody to make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode with anybody that you know is trying to work in the sports industry. And also, make sure to keep up to date with other episodes, on if you're listening to the audio version on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and also make sure to follow the podcast account on Instagram at OFP underscore podcast, and as well as also on TikTok at OFP underscore podcast for exclusive content to help promote the episodes and to help to highlight certain things happening around the sports industry. What I repost, what I inform people about. Make sure to go follow the platforms for the Off Field Players podcast to stay up to date. But with that being said, and sorry for trying to catch everybody up to speed in such a long-winded way, but I definitely want to go into continuing actually with the NASCAR discussion, because by the time that this episode is going up, and also let me not forget, by the time that I'm recording this episode, it's February 1st, which means it's the first day of Black History Month. So shout out to all the OFPs that are continuing to grow the legacy, to continue to break barriers throughout Black History Month, as well as representing their sports organizations. Definitely, very glad to, as myself being an African American, to work in the sports industry and can also promote the industry for what it is, for people of different diverse backgrounds. But throughout the month, I will be touching a little bit on Black History Month and also just Black history in the sports industry. So definitely make sure to be on the lookout for that. But as I was saying, I do want to continue my NASCAR conversation, because we are coming up close to the start of the 2024 NASCAR season. The Busch Light Clash at the Los Angeles Coliseum is set for February 4th, which will be this Sunday by the time I'm recording this. And like the Daytona 500 set for February 18th, which is a few weeks away. And definitely a lot to be excited about for a year. But the one thing that I do want to touch on was NASCAR being featured on Netflix just recently. So a couple days ago, NASCAR dropped a 5-episode series covering their NASCAR playoffs and highlighting the drivers that were competing for the NASCAR Cup Series championship. And the title of the series is called NASCAR Full Speed. It's a Netflix production. They were all hands on with the project and putting out the 5 episodes of highlighting and covering the drivers that were competing for the NASCAR Cup Series title. Getting into their personal lives, their backstories about how they were able to get into racing. What they've accomplished to date in their careers, and also just their projection and their journey and trying to go after the NASCAR Cup Series championship. And like last night, I was able to finish watching the series because when I first heard about NASCAR being featured on Netflix, in my mind I was thinking, finally, like that SpongeBob meme, like the guy that was obsessed with chocolate, like finally, just having that feeling. And finally be able to witness the sport that I grew up watching and the sport that I worked in, being featured on a big platform, a worldwide platform, and Netflix. And of course, everybody and their mama know that Netflix, when it came to motorsports, was always known for Formula One, Drive to Survive, and their series. So this new series that Netflix put out for NASCAR Full Speed, this was like NASCAR's answer to Drive to Survive. And I know that NASCAR fans and people across the industry, they were clinging and trying to see NASCAR be featured on a bigger platform, because this past year with the 75th anniversary season, it was one of NASCAR's biggest years. If the different races, the stars being having more promotion off the track, and just even the viewership increase there was, for the sport, not just in the United States, but worldwide. And just the global impact that NASCAR has had in motorsports, and just being the sport that it is with the history that it's had, with, different diverse drivers coming in, like well-known world corporate sponsors, sponsoring up with drivers and building partnerships with the sport. And just also the promotion behind the marquee events like the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum, the Chicago Street Course Race, the All-Star Race at North Wilkesboro, the Daytona 500, which is a regular thing, and of course championship weekend being at Phoenix. Everything that NASCAR has been doing to this date is just been able to revolutionize the sport for what it is. And again, highly recommend you go watch my Steve Phelps interview so you could hear a little bit more about what we talked about in regards to the 75th anniversary and the future plans that NASCAR has going forward. But again, I want to focus more on the NASCAR Netflix series that just came out. And just seeing it finally come into fruition that NASCAR fans, NASCAR personalities were able to be featured in a Netflix documentary series. It was due. I mean, I knew that NASCAR at some point was going to have to, jump over, make the leap and getting onto mainstream media, whether that was through Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, whatever. There had to be, like, it was due time for NASCAR to be highlighted on a bigger playing field so they can compete with a sport like Formula One. And of course, with Drive to Survive, like they just announced a few weeks ago that season 6 was going to be releasing. So, of course, everybody's going to be looking forward to season 6 for Drive to Survive. And I know with the writers and the production crew at Netflix, I'm sure they're going to have some storylines to touch on, especially with the season that Formula One had in 2023. Of course, with the biggest event being the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And, I did an episode on that as well. You can go back and watch that. But I just want to touch a little bit on what I liked and, things that I wish I could have seen more in NASCAR Full Speed. And, I'm not going to like draw out any spoilers because, I want to make sure that for the folks that didn't watch the series yet, that you go watch it for yourself. But I'm going to touch on just some of the inside stuff that I saw and that, stood out to me, as I was watching the 5 episodes. But yeah, again, I'm not going to try to spoil too much, but I am going to go do a deep dive review on just the series overall. So what I thought was great about the NASCAR Full Speed series, besides the promotion of it and just the production about it, was the fact that they kept it, linear. I mean, like, it was great that they made the focus just beyond the NASCAR playoffs because the NASCAR season is long. It's 38 weeks, and like the playoffs is it's 10 races. It's the last few races of the season, and just for the sport or for Netflix to highlight that part of the season, I thought it was a good taste for, say, folks that never watched NASCAR before, or for the casual fans that they probably watch NASCAR every blue moon, but they don't know like the stats, they don't know the championship format, or maybe they don't know a lot about the drivers and the teams, but they understand it enough to where, like, yeah, it's very competitive. Drivers have these big personalities, like they're stars in their respective capacities, and they go out week after week just to dominate and just to go after and collect wins and try to get the checkered flag. So it was great that they touched on just the personality side of the drivers, and in regards to the drivers that they featured on, because they didn't feature every driver that made the playoffs that year. Of course, with that way that the NASCAR playoffs is set up, is 16 drivers, like when it first started. So you got the round of 16, the round of 12, the round of 8, then the championship 4. That's the final race that settles the title decider for whoever wins at Phoenix, or whoever has the highest finishing position in the last race of the season. So the drivers that they covered were Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Ross Chastain, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, and Kyle Larson. And when you hear those names, like, yeah, those are like the household names. Like, those are the stars of the sports. Like the superstars. Like, Bubba's of course with 2311 Racing, Michael Jordan's team. Denny Hamlin, 3-time Daytona 500 winner, racing for Joe Gibbs. Joey Logano, the reigning champion who won the NASCAR Cup Series champion a year prior. And of course, Kyle Larson, another reigning NASCAR Cup Series champion. And it was great that they touched on these guys in particular because they're the guys that are like the fresh faces of the sport. They're the superstars. They're at the level of, say, like the Patrick Mahomes or like the Stephen Curry or the LeBron James of NASCAR. They're at that level. They're superstars. And just for the way that Netflix was able to set it up to where they did the deep dives on their personal lives, like highlighting them as family men, like their backstories for how they were able to get into racing, and even just what they've accomplished to their career to date, and just going through, behind the scenes with, what they do with their teams, what they do with their sponsors, and what they do at the track to help them prepare for a race. Because, again, like it's during the playoffs, so these races are marquee events, as well as also being, do or die situations for their chances to go after a championship. So for Netflix to be able to capture that part, sure, it was already a good selling point, especially knowing that Netflix doesn't really have a ton of experience in covering NASCAR. Especially with, all the other sports documentaries that they've produced and that they've uploaded, and, also just trying to make sure they stay in that niche or where the content is captivating to motorsports fans. Of course, they already do a good job with what they do with Drive to Survive, but for NASCAR, I think there was a few learning curves that they had to go through to make sure that the filming behind it was still enticing, but also still in a way to where they're not, they're not going super crazy with it. Because, if you'd ask me, for someone that, I watched Drive to Survive, so, I already know the feeling of, what Netflix tries to do, like when they, like, on the cinematic side as well as just the promotional side of it. But if you were to ask me if for my opinion on how I feel sometimes about Drive to Survive, I think it could be a little bit too dramatized. Just the way that, they interact with the drivers, or if there's like a conversation behind closed doors. I think Netflix tries to add too much of a drama feel to it. But in this case, what they did with NASCAR Dog, which I really liked, is that they didn't try to dramatize too much. They kept it genuine. Like, yeah, they covered the behind the door conversations. They, again, like, there was no fillers or anything like that. They they didn't censor anything out. Like, they kept it very authentic to where, not just me being someone that's very knowledgeable about NASCAR can understand, but also something that the casual fan, or even the fan that they're trying to introduce to NASCAR, can also understand as well. Because I'm sure that the people that watch, NASCAR Full Speed are probably people that also watch Drive to Survive. Because, same production team, same writers, all that. They were behind it. They had some involvement with it, and I'm sure, they made sure to partner up with NASCAR Productions to, be like, hey, what should we do? Like, what stuff should we keep out? What's too confidential to, for the fans to know about? And yeah, I'm sure, like, when they were in these writer rooms, they made sure to keep that in mind, and, they did a good job with it. There was no slip ups on that front. But I think one of the slip ups that I thought, they could have instilled more in the doc, or not, I shouldn't say doc, the series, is I think they left a few things out that probably would have helped the casual fans or the new fans kind of, be introduced to the sport in a proper way. And I know, like, the one thing that I found kind of disappointing was that they didn't talk a lot about the 75th anniversary aspect of NASCAR. Knowing that, it was a big year for NASCAR. It was an anniversary season, and, not one time did I, or not there wasn't a time where I could recollect them even bringing it up. Mention, like, oh, this is NASCAR 75th anniversary season. Oh, like, so, like, this championship is going to mean a lot more and be a lot more monumental for the driver that wins it. I think they could have spotlighted that a little bit more, and just also, go through the history of what the playoff format has always been like. Because throughout the different decades of the sport, NASCAR has changed their championship format. It used to be, going through, like, an outright point system, kind of like how it is in F1. And then, in the early 2000s, like, which was my era, like when I was first introduced to the sport, like, they had the chase for the cup format. And then, when they initiated it's like the pilot of what was known as today as the NASCAR playoffs, in, like, kind of like the early 2010s, there was that elimination factor, and they could have went through that. They could have went through the different history of how championships had to be won. And I think if they could have led with that in the first episode, or even the second episode, because I know the first episode they really put a lot of attention on the regular season finale race at Daytona. When the race that helped Bubba Wallace get into the playoffs, because 20 through 11, they were trying to get their last driver in on the cut line, along with Tyler Reddick, who had already won a race early in the season. But I felt maybe the second episode that would have been the perfect timing to touch more on the history of the championship formats that NASCAR has had over time, because I feel like when you're trying to introduce this series or introduce NASCAR to new fans, especially people that are already aware for how the championship format works in F1 because they've learned it through Drive to Survive, I think it's a good way to keep those fans or keep the retention rate of the fans coming in just through the impact that Netflix is already having by doing a whole series about the sport. So it would have been great to see just the history of the playoff format be touched on, because every time when I was watching an episode, or when it came to the conclusion part of the episode, they would always show the standings for where the drivers are for each round. So, round of 12, they would show like the drivers that are above 12th in the standings in the playoff standings, and they showed the cut line for the driver for the 4 drivers that are on the cusp of not making it to the next round. So if I'm in the shoes of a new fan and I see that, I wouldn't know what the heck that would mean. I wouldn't know what, like why the cut line is pivotal to a driver's performance in the next race or in the elimination race, and I wouldn't understand how the points are being accumulated, because think about the NASCAR playoffs, the points are accumulated through stage racing, and it comes with where you finish for each stage, which is another thing too. Like they didn't touch a lot about on just the aspect of stage racing and how you win a stage during a race, or if you win the race altogether, that helps with your chances in the playoffs. I don't think they touched or gave much insight on just that format, and I think maybe some fans were probably left confused. I'm not saying some fans. I'm referring more to the new fans, and maybe also the casual fans as well. But I think if there was more of a backstory regarding the championship format and just the history behind it, then it probably would have added a little bit more substance to it. But again, I'm not a production writer or anything like that, so maybe maybe that wasn't their focus at the time, and maybe they thought it was just filler, for consuming time, because each episode was within 45 minutes to an hour, so I'm sure they couldn't really touch on everything. They wanted to keep the action more of the focus rather than just the logistics behind the whole championship format altogether, which is not a big issue. But I just think for someone that's watched the sport over time and has always been trying to introduce people to the sport, I felt like you could have spoke more on the championship format. But that's here or there, and I think also what they also could have done was introduce, or not introduce, but to touch more on the storyline of how each playoff driver made the playoffs. And I know they wanted to keep a certain number of drivers as far as just telling their backstories, because they only featured 9 drivers when of course the entire playoffs had 16 drivers. And I know you want to keep the stars, you want to keep the the big names involved and make that your focus. I get it. That I understand from a writer's productions perspective. But at the same time though, I think it would have been important to give the backstory of how each driver made their spot in the playoffs. I mean, you could have at least shown the clip of what race Ross Chastain had to win to be able to get into the playoffs, or what race impacted. Well, they already did this, but they impacted the race that Bubba Wallace had, or they showed the race that had the biggest impact on Bubba Wallace's chances making the playoffs, which was the regular season finale at Daytona. And I just think you could have touched a little bit more on that. You could have, made that the explanation to kind of help substitute the lack of talking about the history of the playoff format, like with the backstory of what the drivers had to go through during the regular season. And just kind of keeping that linear information, kind of similar to how they do with Formula One, involved with the championship format. Because I think it's easier for Formula One to not touch so much on the championship format because they're already covering the entire season to begin with, from start to end. And also, with Formula One's schedule, it's a lot shorter than NASCAR schedule. Like Formula One, they run like a 22, 24 race schedule, while NASCAR runs a 36 race schedule. And I guess the opportunities to what Netflix tries to prioritize when featuring certain, in moments throughout the season, there is an importance for making sure that they keep it linear, but also keep it genuine to where they're not going too far off the rails with the whole idea of going through a NASCAR season, going through an F1 season, or going through the season of struggles and ups and downs and things like that. And I like that they kept the focus on the NASCAR playoffs, which is a good start. I'm gonna prioritize that. It was a good start for Netflix to prioritize the NASCAR playoffs, as their introduction to a possibility of having a full-on keep up with the season NASCAR series down the line, which is a perfect segue into my next topic that I will want to discuss on in regards to the NASCAR Full Speed. And from what I've been seeing as far as the reviews of the NASCAR Full Speed series, they've been pretty good. I know Rotten Tomatoes, they had 100% on the reviews of the series. And, just from looking at Twitter and going through, or I shouldn't say Twitter, X, and going through what people have said and what their remarks have been about the series. I mean, it's pretty high. Even there was a tweet that I saw of where NASCAR Full Speed ranks in different countries, because Netflix is a worldwide brand. Everybody around the world watches Netflix, and NASCAR Full Speed, they were in the top 10 in most countries. In Europe, Asia, South America. Like, they were up there. I mean, there's some positivity in people that are tuned into the NASCAR Full Speed series, which is helping NASCAR in a big way globally, if it hasn't already. And I feel like for NASCAR and their relationship with Netflix now, this is the perfect opportunity to hopefully keep this momentum going. And yeah, like, I know there's going to be some competition with trying to stay up to speed with Drive to Survive, and how Netflix has been able to capitalize on that success alone with that project. But what NASCAR Full Speed was able to do, and just the short amount of content that they put together for 5 episodes, this to me seems like it's going to be the build up for a potential bigger production in the future, which is what my biggest hope is. I think what I saw in NASCAR Full Speed, it definitely shows that a full-on throughout the season NASCAR series on Netflix can be possible. It can be done. It really can. And it's great to know that now like the stars of the sport, they're not camera shy anymore, because they understand, like, hey, we're the faces of the sport. We need to make sure that we're on camera. We need to make sure that we're going on talk shows. We need to make sure that the corporate partners, are bigger corporate partners that are world renowned and that are big sellers, are coming into the sport just to help maintain the product. It's great that, because again, everybody knows Bubba Wallace, because he has a whole Netflix series dedicated to himself in regards to the first season that 23XI had back in 2021. So that's already done. Like, there's already a Netflix series dedicated to one of the stars in the sports. Joey Logano. I mean, it's a shock to me that he's a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series championship, but if I go around California, or if I go somewhere in the Midwest and ask people, "Hey, do you know who Joey Logano is?" Like they'll most likely say no. Even where Joey Logano's back from, like Joey Logano's from Connecticut, and even when I was going to school at St. John's, and I would bring up people like, "Oh yeah, like there's a NASCAR driver that's from the tri-state area, up from Connecticut." They still wouldn't know who he is, and yeah, I mean it really dawns on me that the stars of the sport, at least the stars that we know now, they're not being camera shy anymore, and they're striking when the iron's hot, and now the iron is really hot. So my biggest hope is that NASCAR Full Speed was the taste of something that can become bigger, a bigger NASCAR series like down the line. And it's going to be tough too because NASCAR is a long schedule, not as long as what Formula One has going, but there's still a lot of opportunities to produce content in a big way to still continue to grow the brand. There's so many possibilities that can be put together with this NASCAR series, like in the future, hoping that it can continue to bring more fans to the sport, have the young audience learn more about the stars, and also just be be more involved, be just being more aware of where the sport is going from a production side. Because in this day and age, people are now captivated by sports documentaries. They're captivated by sports series. They want to see drama. And I know for me being Gen Z, that's what we like. Well, when we watch sports, we like the drama. We like the backstories. We like to see what driver is dating who. We like that. We like that stuff. And that was another thing too that they touched on in NASCAR Full Speed too. Like I liked how they kept the storyline. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but there's some storylines to where they really involved the family aspect of the sport, because NASCAR is a very very family oriented sport, and it was great to see them highlight the storylines of what families had to do to keep their kids involved, or even encourage their kids to go after their dreams of becoming a NASCAR star someday. And for those that haven't seen the series yet, definitely pay close attention to that, because what makes NASCAR such a unique sport is the accessibility that the fans have with drivers. It's not like in other sports to where you need somebody need to know somebody on the inside, or if you have close ties with a family member that works for the team, to be up close with the star of the team, the role players or anything like that. NASCAR drivers, they go to the fans. It's not like the fans coming to them. No, they will go and visit fans at the races to sign autographs, to have conversations, or even to just hang out. I mean, the human element of just socialization is a big factor in the sport, because NASCAR drivers know that, hey, this is family oriented, and people come out every weekend and they support us in every way they can, and our return is to show face, just to be out there amongst the crowd, and it's a great thing to see. And that's another thing that they highlight in the doc too. I like how they highlight the unique aspect of what NASCAR is as a sport. They highlight the aspect of drivers being very interactive with the fans. Just the fan culture of NASCAR, and also, just how much determination and how much demand there is to succeed in a sport, and the sport that's filled with more failure than it is filled with success. And yeah, it was just a really overall a great series to stay tuned in for, and to keep up to date, especially again with how much I've grown up with the sport, my involvement with the sport, and just seeing NASCAR finally being put on a big platform for the young generation, and hopefully they keep it going. I really hope so. But yeah, that's just my quick deep dive on how my thoughts on the NASCAR Full Speed series. what I liked about it, what I thought could have been improved, and yeah, even just highlighting something that's very important. This is like for the OFPs tuning in. This is like the involvement of sports media, sports production, like entertainment. So yeah, like there's an OFP aspect in this too, because they talk with team owners, they talk with team presidents, they talk with the pit crew trainers. Like there are some OFP aspects involved in the series. It wasn't just focus all on the drivers. So but yeah, like definitely when you check it out, if you haven't already, definitely see that, see what people that are working off the track. I can't really categorize them as off-field players. I categorize them as off-track play or off-track players, and yeah, just seeing what they bring to the table and what they've done to the sport. Just to help support the drivers, help support teams, and help support the overall spectrum that is the National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing. Yeah, but yeah, it was great overall, and highly recommend that you go check it out yourself. Yeah, this is gonna wrap it up for the Off Field Players podcast. I know it was a short one, but I definitely wanted to make sure that everybody know that I didn't disappear, that I'm still here. I still, believe in the growth of this podcast. Still want to make sure that I'm keeping the aspiring OFPs up to date on what's happening in the industry, and also keep it entertaining and touching on the things that I'm involved in and the things that I see on a regular basis working in sports. And yeah, just continuing to go after what you want to go after, and just being able to stay aware of the different opportunities there are in sports. And as I continue to have more time to produce more episodes, I want to make sure that I continue to get the word out, continue to help inspire the next generation of sports industry professionals, and yeah, just continue to be the OFP of the OFPs. That's how I'll probably put it. Yeah, that's going to wrap it up for me and the return episode of the Off Field Players podcast, episode number 30, the first episode of 2024. And yeah, just want to remind everybody to make sure to be on the lookout for future episodes coming in the near future. Again, I'm going to definitely do my best in trying to have a consistent schedule of putting episodes out. I know with my work schedule, it's been kind of tough just to get back in the rhythm of it, but I'm going to find that rhythm back and be able to produce content on a regular basis. And yeah, I don't know, maybe you might see something different that's probably not podcast related, but still tied to the off field player culture and down the line somewhere. But as a reminder, I want to make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you tune into the video version on YouTube. If you listen to the audio version of this on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Radio Public. Make sure to leave 5 stars, and also make sure to share the link with anybody that you know that wants to work in the sports industry. And also make sure to keep up to date with the Off Field Players podcast on social media. Follow our account at OFP_podcast on Instagram, and also check us out at OFP_podcast on TikTok as well. But that's going to wrap it up for me. Again, this has been the NASCAR Full Speed episode review. And yeah, just another reminder, NASCAR season is coming up. And yeah, they got the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum this Sunday, February 4th. So definitely make sure to check it out. I'm sure it's going to be an exciting race. And yeah, definitely stay up to date with what NASCAR has going in store, and stay up to date on the next episode they have coming out in the near future. But want to wish everybody a safe weekend, safe travels. Stay safe overall if you're going to a watch party for the Super Bowl, or if you're just traveling somewhere during this time. And also stay motivated, stay blessed, stay healthy, stay thankful, and as always, make sure to achieve what you believe.